You do not get to look at them like that. Lena's voice didn't rise above the music. It didn't have to. It struck clean through Jesse Vaney, who stood near the marble fountain, glass of champagne untouched in his hand. The string quartet played something light in the distance. Guests laughed softly in tailored linen. Ice clinked in crystal tumblers. This was the kind of party where wealth looked casual and mistakes wore cologne. Jesse had arrived alone, as always. But now the air shifted. He turned. There she stood, Lena, holding the hands of two boys. They couldn't have been older than 6. Small frames, straight backs, wide, alert eyes. His eyes, same grey-blue, same stillness. Jesse's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. His breath stalled. For a second, the music, the chatter, the flicker of lanterns, none of it existed. Only her. And them. He hadn't prepared for this. He hadn't even known to prepare. Lena didn't flinch. Her body stood steady between him and the children. Not out of fear, out of finality. She repeated it calmly. They are not a discovery. They are people. Jesse blinked. It didn't help. The boys still stood there, still watching him with quiet curiosity. One leaned slightly into Lena's side. The other tilted his head, assessing. Neither looked afraid. But Jesse couldn't breathe, not because he was surprised to see children, but because something in their eyes shattered his center. They were his, no doubt. He'd built empires from risk and instinct, trusted his gut in rooms full of ruthless men. But this was different. He didn't need DNA or a timeline. He knew. His chest tightened. The champagne glass wobbled in his grip. Lena, he said. Just her name. That was all he could manage. She didn't answer, didn't move. Instead, she glanced toward the boys, gave a tiny nod, a mother's cue. They stepped slightly back, hands still clasped with hers. Jesse's gaze dropped to their shoes. One wore sneakers with stars, the other scuffed sandals with a missing strap. Details that shouldn't matter, but mattered. He looked back up. She was still watching him, composed, unmoved, certain. She didn't look like someone returning from pain. She looked like someone who had already healed. Lena shifted her stance slightly, just enough to block Jesse's line of sight to the boys. Not protectively, deliberately. You don't get to stare, she said, her tone low, steady, not like that. The party around them went on. Jazz mingled with laughter. Waiters moved between guests with practiced ease. No one noticed the standoff at the edge of the stone path. Jesse did not respond. He couldn't. His mind was caught somewhere between memory and disbelief. She spoke again, her words measured. They have names. They are not a revelation. They are people. That line cut deeper than any lawsuit, deeper than the divorce papers he once read without looking up from a balance sheet. Jesse looked past her just for a second, toward the boys. They were still watching. One curious, the other more guarded. He felt the weight of 5 silent years land squarely on his shoulders. He tried to speak. Something, anything, that could bridge the impossible gap. Tell me, he said, voice cracking slightly. Please. Lena studied him, not with emotion, but evaluation, as if weighing risk, not for herself, for them. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her sons. Her hands remained steady, their fingers still wrapped around hers. Then, finally, she said, Kael. She placed her left hand gently on the boy beside her. Zion. Their names landed like stone. Not dramatic, not loud, final. Jesse's mouth parted, but nothing came out. These weren't guesses. These weren't possibilities. These were his sons. Lena's jaw was set. Her shoulders relaxed, but her spine straight. She stood not as a woman pleading to be seen, but as a mother who refused to let her children be objectified by apology. Jesse looked at the boys again. Kael, with his observant stillness. Zion, blinking up at the strings of lanterns like he was cataloguing their pattern. He had missed everything. First steps, First words, first birthdays. He turned to Lena, shame crawling up his throat. "I didn't know." "I did," she replied softly. "That's the difference." A server passed, offering him another drink. Jesse didn't blink. For the first time in years, he had no use for a distraction. Jesse stepped forward slightly. Not close enough to touch, just enough to mean something. His voice dropped. "I would have come." Lena didn't blink. "You didn't even stay." The silence that followed hurt more than shouting ever could. In the distance, a woman from the event approached with a polite smile. She gestured toward Jesse as if ready to introduce him to another connection. But before she could speak, Lena interrupted. "No," she said. "We have not met." It wasn't cruel. It was clear. She turned to the boys. Her tone softened. "Go find Mrs. Caldwell. Stay where I can see you." They nodded and walked off, heads close together. One looked back once. Jesse felt it like a second chance and a punishment all at once. He watched them disappear through the crowd, then turned back to her. "You hid them," he said quietly. "I protected them," she replied. "From absence, from disappointment, from you." There was no hate in her tone, just truth, the kind that didn't leave room for defense. He left for a merger. She signed a loan. Now he's looking into eyes that reflect everything he lost. If you believe presence means more than promises, like this video, comment what love means to you. Jesse Vaney arrived in a matte black town car that didn't need announcing. The driver opened the door before the vehicle fully stopped, revealing the man behind one of the most aggressive acquisitions on Wall Street that quarter. Navy-tailored shirt, rolled sleeves, no tie, sunglasses that hid more than glare. He stepped onto the gravel drive of a Hamptons estate worth more than some countries' defense budgets. Everything smelled like wealth here, salt air, lemon blossoms, and new money pretending to be old. It was the annual Keller Summer event, a gathering of legacy investors, whispered negotiations, and casual flexes, the kind of place where mistakes were quietly corrected with cash, and loyalty had a price tag. Jesse walked alone across the stone path, nodding at familiar faces. No one questioned his solo entrance. He always came alone. He never brought dates, never needed conversation to be noticed. His silence had weight, and his money did the rest. A glass of champagne was placed in his hand within seconds. The flute remained untouched. He scanned the crowd, not looking for anyone in particular, just observing, calculating. A firm handshake here, a quick nod there. Someone clapped him on the back and muttered something about an upcoming energy deal. Jesse gave a thin smile and didn't respond. A string quartet played under a white canopy. Lawn chairs sat untouched, arranged more for aesthetic than use. The fountain at the garden center spilled gently, its marble figure half draped in ivy. Jesse drifted toward it, standing at its edge like a man who had everything and still couldn't shake the feeling something was missing. He sipped nothing. He said nothing. His posture was relaxed, but nothing about him softened. He didn't notice the hush behind him. Not yet. But the moment was coming, and it would be louder than anything a symphony could play. Jesse didn't chase conversations. They came to him. A hedge fund partner clinked glasses beside him. Still running Vaney Global like a battlefield? Jesse gave a small smirk. "Only when I'm bored." The man laughed too hard. Jesse had already turned away. He walked slowly through the party, hands relaxed in his pockets, every step calculated. Guests parted without being asked. Some greeted him with quiet reverence. Others nodded, uncertain if speaking would cost them something. To them, Jesse wasn't just rich. He was decisive, ruthless, impossible to read. Under the open-air pavilion, two VCs whispered about his last move in tech, how he'd pulled out weeks before the valuation crash. One of them spotted him and straightened immediately. Jesse didn't acknowledge them. He didn't need to. Women eyed him, but none approached. They knew his reputation. He entertained no small talk. If he wanted company, it was chosen, not offered. A server moved toward him with a refill. Jesse waved it off. The first glass was still untouched. He paused at the edge of the garden, where trimmed hedges framed the path like theatre curtains. From here, he could see the entire scene, silk dresses catching breeze, ties loosened near the wine tables, old men bragging about land no one cared about. A real estate magnate brushed past and slapped him on the shoulder. "They say you're unshakable, Vaney." "Still true?" Jesse's jaw moved slightly. He said nothing. His silence had always worked like a mirror, reflecting back what others feared or admired. No one ever knew which. A woman in diamonds leaned toward her husband and murmured, "That's Jesse Vaney, the one who—" He kept walking. To everyone here, Jesse wasn't a man. He was a myth with a pulse. But that was about to change. He hadn't seen her yet. He hadn't seen them. Not yet. But he would. And when he did, no amount of strategy or silence would protect him from the truth standing 10 feet away. The music didn't stop, but something shifted. A subtle hush, a ripple, not loud enough for anyone to panic, but enough that Jesse noticed. He turned, out of habit more than interest, and everything inside him locked. Lena. She walked through the garden arch with her chin lifted and her pace steady. Her dress was simple. The color hugged her skin like it belonged there. No glitter, no fanfare. Still, the crowd seemed to move aside without knowing why. Her hands weren't empty. On each side, a boy held her fingers with quiet confidence. 2 boys, about 6 years old. Their steps matched hers, measured, grounded. They didn't fidget. They weren't clinging. They stood like they were used to belonging anywhere they stepped. Jesse stared. The champagne in his hand nearly tipped. He caught it, but barely. He couldn't hear the violin anymore. He couldn't hear anything. His chest tightened. His feet stayed rooted. Those eyes, same pale grey blue, same sharp angles around the lids, same way of holding still when the world moved too fast. They weren't just familiar, they were his. Lena's eyes found his. No hesitation, no drama. She didn't blink. Jesse opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Everything he thought he controlled, the room, his image, the story people told when they said his name, none of it mattered now. He couldn't move, because one truth was walking toward him in 2 sets of small shoes. And he was the last person in the garden to realize it. Lena stopped 5 steps away, close enough for Jesse to see the tension in her jaw, far enough to make it clear there would be no touching, no pretending. She adjusted her stance. Her shoulders were square. Her body formed a quiet wall between Jesse and the boys. Jesse tried again. "Lena." His voice cracked. She looked him in the eye. Her tone stayed calm. "You don't get to look at them like that." He blinked, stunned. "They're children," she said. "Not revelations, not accidents, not stories for your regret." The words hit harder than he expected. No venom, just precision. Jesse's eyes dropped to the boys again. One clutched Lena's hand tighter. The other stared at him like he was reading a book with pages missing. "Tell me," he said, his voice lower now. "Please." Lena glanced at her sons. She didn't hesitate. She reached down gently, palm on the shoulder of the boy to her right. Kael, then the other, Zion. The names dropped between them like an anchor. Jesse's breath caught. He mouthed each name silently, as if repeating it could rewind time. "I didn't know," he said. "I did," Lena replied. "That's the difference." He stepped forward instinctively. She didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. She didn't need to say anything. The line was clear. He stopped. Kyle and Zion looked up at her, then at him. Neither flinched, neither smiled. They just watched. Jesse turned to Lena. "I would have—" "You didn't," she cut in gently. "When I needed you most, you were reading numbers." The party moved around them like they didn't exist. Jazz filled the air again. But inside this quiet corner, nothing was the same. Lena looked at him one last time. "This is not a reunion," she said. "This is reality." She turned, leading her sons into the crowd. Jesse stood still. For once, Nothing in his hands could fix what was now written across his past. KL, Zion, and the woman who taught them how to live without waiting for him. The apartment used to feel like home. Now it echoed. Lena stood in the doorway of their penthouse, coat still on, holding a dinner bag in one hand and her phone in the other. The screen was blank. No calls, no messages. Again, the hallway lights cast a soft glow across the marble floor. The dining table was set, candles lit, plates warm but untouched. She had tried to keep the food fresh. He had said he was on the way. That was an hour ago. She walked into the kitchen, set the bag down, and removed her heels without a word. The silence pressed against her, dense and familiar. Jesse wasn't late because of traffic. He wasn't answering because he was busy. Again, she paced once through the living room, eyes landing on the framed photo from a ski trip 2 years earlier, back when he still laughed easily, and she didn't feel like an accessory to his ambition. She sat on the edge of the couch, checked her phone again, then again. Nothing. A calendar alert buzzed quietly. Dinner with Jesse, 7 p.m. She swiped it away. At 9:17, the lock finally clicked. Jesse entered, loosening his collar, phone still pressed to his ear. He nodded in her direction, but didn't stop. His voice carried from the hallway. "No, we'll push the southeast numbers to next quarter. Tell Caleb to hold the proposal." Pause. "Yeah, I'll approve the numbers. Email it tonight." Lena stood. He passed her without looking, straight to his office, door closing behind him. She didn't follow. She didn't ask any more. She turned off the dining lights, blew out the candles, washed the plates she had just set. When she finally walked past his office door, she didn't pause. She was already learning to live without his presence, even while he was in the next room. Weeks blurred. Jesse left early, returned late. His eyes stayed on screens. His focus lived inside spreadsheets, conference calls, and looming deadlines. The merger with Andris Group consumed everything. It was all he talked about, all he prioritized. One night, Lena stood behind him in the office, arms folded. The city's skyline stretched wide through the glass wall ahead. "It's almost midnight," she said. Jesse didn't turn. "I'll be done soon. You said that yesterday." And the day before, he scrolled through data, unmoved. "This deal restructures our global footing. If I don't lock this now, someone else will." Lena leaned on the doorframe. Her voice didn't shake. "You used to fight for us like that." Jesse finally looked at her, his expression blank. "This is temporary." "No, this is a pattern." He looked away. "We can't build a future on missed chances. This merger secures everything." "For who?" she asked. That silence said more than any excuse could. He adjusted his watch and turned back to his monitor. Lena stayed still for a moment longer, then stepped back. She didn't slam the door. She closed it gently. He didn't come after her. He didn't ask what she needed. He convinced himself she would understand, that she would wait. That love adjusted to schedules. That night, she packed her hospital ID badge into a drawer. Her hand paused over a small white envelope she hadn't opened yet. She placed it in her bag. He never asked why. It was raining the day she brought the envelope. Not the soft kind. The kind that blurred traffic and soaked shoes in seconds. Lena didn't carry an umbrella. She didn't slow her steps. Her hand clutched the folder the way some women carried flowers into a funeral. The front desk security nodded without a word. She rode the elevator alone. 38 floors up, same glass walls, same sterile lighting. Jesse's assistant offered a smile as she approached. "He's still in the finance meeting." Lena didn't answer. She placed the folder on the assistant's desk. "Make sure he gets this," she said quietly. "Should the first tell him?" "No." Lena looked up. "Don't tell him anything. He'll understand when he reads it." She turned and walked toward the elevator. But before pressing the button, something in her shifted. She turned back, took the envelope, and walked past the assistant. Her heels didn't hesitate. Not once. Jesse was alone in his office when she entered. Phone pressed to his shoulder, laptop open, posture rigid. He didn't look up. "We'll push the final review to Friday." No, I'll handle the disclosure. Lena stepped forward. Her hand set the folder gently on his desk. He kept talking. She waited. When he finally looked at her, it was like seeing someone he used to know. I'm busy, he said. What is it? She didn't answer, didn't explain. She stepped back. He opened the folder and saw his name next to hers, printed, formatted, final. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She looked calm, whole, decided. You are already gone, she said. He stared at the papers, then at her, still silent. Her voice didn't waver. I won't beg you to notice what's been missing. She turned and left before he could respond. The pen stayed in his hand, but he never used it. She had already signed. The next morning, Lena packed a single suitcase. She left the apartment keys on the counter next to a note that said nothing more than, "Don't come looking. I'm not lost." Her name was still on some of the bills. Her clothes still hung in the closet. But she didn't take much. Just what mattered. The envelope from her doctor's visit. A pair of walking shoes. A printed photo of her mother. The pregnancy test had been positive 2 weeks earlier. She had planned to tell him that night, before the merger, before it all swallowed him whole. She waited. He never asked how her day was. He never even looked up. She carried that silence out the door. No one saw her leave. Not the doorman. Not his assistant. Not the colleagues who once invited her to company dinners she stopped attending. She moved to a smaller city, rented a one-bedroom with a kitchen that hummed too loud when the fridge kicked in. She didn't tell anyone from her old life. She didn't have to. She got a job at a local clinic. Nothing flashy. It gave her insurance, a reason to get up. She bought prenatal vitamins with cash. At night, she talked to the growing life inside her belly, one hand resting over the place Jessie would never know. You're not going to grow up waiting on someone who never showed up, she whispered. She meant it. The day the twins arrived, Kale first, Zion a minute later, there was no camera, no man pacing the hallway, no roses in a vase. But there was peace. She named them herself. No debate, no hesitation. Names that spoke of strength, not sorrow. She stared at their faces for hours, memorizing every blink, every breath. And when the nurse asked if the father was coming, she only said, "No, he's busy." Jessie never knew. He never came. And by the time he wanted to show up, Lena had already learned how to stand on her own. Lena arrived in Raleigh with no family waiting and no promise of help. The bus station was humid, the street signs unfamiliar, and her back ached from sitting too long. But she carried something more important than comfort. She carried resolve. Her bank account barely covered first month's rent in a modest duplex. 2 rooms, aging appliances, and a thermostat that needed tapping before it responded. But it was hers. Quiet. No echoes of slammed doors. No second-hand silence. Pregnancy moved through her body like a test. Fatigue, nausea, aches. But Lena didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to. She needed work. Fast. She found 3 jobs within 2 weeks. In the mornings, she answered phones for a pediatric clinic. Noon to dusk, she stocked inventory at a local bookstore, paperbacks, cleaning supplies, deliveries. Nights, she cleaned office spaces downtown, pushing vacuums through halls no one noticed. Her legs swelled, her fingers cramped. Some days, she ate saltine crackers on the bus and called it dinner. But she showed up. Every shift. No one knew her story. No one asked. When people glanced at her stomach, she held their gaze until they looked away. She refused pity. At night, she read parenting books borrowed from the bookstore. She underlined tips on early bonding, marked pages on emotional development. She learned how to breathe during labor, how to swaddle, how to raise children without relying on the people who chose power over presence. She taped a list of affirmations beside her bed. They will never feel like a burden. They will know love as safety, not fear. They will never wonder if they matter. The apartment was still, small, and often dark, but Lena's future had a heartbeat now. And that was enough. The contractions started early, 5 days before her due date. She walked herself to the hospital. No rush. No panic. She had memorized the route weeks ago. A nurse asked if someone should be called. Lena shook her head. "It's just me," she said, calmly. She labored in silence. No one held her hand. No one paced the waiting room. But the doctor on call noticed something about her. She didn't cry out, didn't scream. She breathed, counted, held. First came Kyle, crying, healthy. Then, 1 minute later, Zion, quieter, blinking up at the ceiling like he was listening for something. Lena looked at them both. Tiny bodies, new lungs. Her eyes flooded, but the tears didn't fall. "I see you," she whispered. "And I'm staying." She had chosen the names weeks earlier, not from a baby book but from meaning. Kyle, strength, firmness, the one who stands. Zion, peace, safety, a home that cannot be moved. No last name was listed on the birth certificates except hers. They were born into a world that had no wealth, no legacy, no guarantees. But they were not born into doubt. She held each child in her arms, memorizing their features. No resemblance could scare her now. She had survived the hard part already. Now came the fight to raise them well. Lena learned how to carry 2 babies without tipping her center of balance. She mapped diaper changes to alarm clocks and memorized every brand that gave free samples. Mornings began with routine, soft music, bath time, fed one, then the other, each one cradled and rocked with equal patience. The apartment never felt fancy, but it felt full of warmth, laughter, stability. She read to them early, not just stories, but instructions. This is a circle. This is your nose. This is your name. Kyle walked first, straight into a pile of folded laundry. Zion talked first. Ma whispered after midnight one quiet week. She disciplined gently, taught through repetition, through example. When one of them threw a toy, she didn't yell. She sat at eye level and said, "We don't break what we care about." Every night before bed, she knelt by their cribs, spoke words they couldn't yet understand. "You're not waiting for anyone to prove they love you. You've had it since day one." Lena didn't pretend life was perfect. Some nights, dinner was toast. Some weeks, the electricity bill got paid a day late. But the boys never felt it. They knew rhythm. They knew her face before sunrise, and her voice before sleep. She had given them something Jessie never did. Consistency. The first time Lena declined a job offer, her hands trembled. It was a temp agency contract. Low pay, long hours, no benefits. She needed the money. But she needed presence more. So she said no. She put a note on her apartment door, basic cleaning, $20, HR, apartments and offices, flexible hours. She printed 100 flyers at the library and walked block to block, pushing them into mail slots. Her first client was a retired schoolteacher. The second, a single dad in a high to rise. Word spread quietly. She kept her prices honest, her work consistent. She showed up early, left late, and never forgot names. By the twins' 3rd birthday, she had 6 regular clients, a steady schedule, and weekends free. She didn't advertise anymore. She didn't need to. Neighbors recommended her before she asked. She hired a second cleaner. Another single mom, paid her fairly, bought her gloves and uniforms. It wasn't an empire, but it was stable. She never looked at Jesse's company again. His headlines meant nothing now. She was building her own kind of power, one she didn't have to beg for, one her sons could grow up proud of. Jesse had planned his arrival carefully. He wore the kind of suit that said effortless control, shoes polished, cufflinks understated. Another elite social function in the city, fundraiser this time, art gallery, political faces, private investors. It was a world he knew how to navigate with ease. He moved through the room with quiet precision, handshakes here, nods there, laughter cued like a metronome. The spotlight always landed on him eventually, but the moment he saw her, everything cracked. Lena. She stood near the exhibit wall, one hand resting on a boy's shoulder. The other child leaned casually into her side. Same posture, same calm. Jessie didn't hear the words of the man speaking beside him. The noise dropped out. She had changed. Stronger somehow. Still, the twins were older now. Taller. Their limbs carried the energy of children growing fast, but their expressions, still, watchful. Jessie took one hesitant step forward. Lena looked up. Her gaze landed on him. She didn't startle. She didn't smile. He stopped. His stomach flipped in a way no negotiation table ever triggered. She didn't look like someone he'd hurt. She looked like someone who no longer needed to explain why. And that terrified him. Jessie opened his mouth. Words lined up in his throat, rehearsed, adjusted, controlled. Lena. She stepped forward before he could say more. Not aggressively, not afraid, just firm. Kyle and Zion looked up, sensing the shift. Jessie's voice faltered. He tried again. I just want to... Lena turned slightly, her body now positioned directly between him and the boys. Not in panic, in principle. They don't need a scene, she said quietly. They need stability. Jessie swallowed hard. I'm not here to disrupt anything. You already did, she replied. He stared at her hands, one gently resting behind Zion's back, steadying him. Her fingers curled slightly, instinctively. A mother's reflex. The boys didn't look confused. They looked informed, like they'd been prepared for this moment. Jessie took a small step forward. Kyle flinched. Zion stepped back. Lena didn't raise her voice. She didn't look away. Don't. Her tone carried more weight than any legal threat he'd ever faced. He stood still. For the first time in years, Jessie realized he wasn't the one setting the terms anymore. He was standing in a life he hadn't built, trying to ask for entrance. And Lena was the gate. Jessie's hands clenched slightly at his sides. He couldn't keep the words down any longer. You hid them from me. Lena's expression didn't change. You never told me. You just walked away. I walked away from neglect, she replied. Not from you. You had my children and said nothing. Jessie's voice rose, not with rage, but disbelief. You didn't even give me a chance. Lena shook her head, slow and controlled. You were never there to ask the right questions. I would have shown up. You didn't show up when I sat across the room waiting for you to notice dinner had gone cold. You didn't show up when I handed you silence, hoping you'd ask why. Jessie blinked. He wasn't used to not having the final word, not in boardrooms, not in his personal life. 5 years, he said. You let them grow up thinking I didn't exist. No, Lena corrected softly. I let them grow up thinking they mattered without needing to earn it. Her words weren't cruel, but they landed like truth always did, with no room to argue. He opened his mouth again. She held up a hand. They don't need your frustration. They need your respect. Jessie stared at her. For a moment, all the arguments he'd stacked in his mind, his rights, his feelings, his loss, felt small. They're mine too, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena didn't move. They're people, not claims. Jessie looked past her at the twins. Kyle was now helping his brother tie one shoelace. Zion glanced up occasionally, watching Lena's face for signals. He felt something foreign crawl up his throat. Regret, maybe. Shame. You kept them from me, he said again, quieter now. Lena exhaled, not in anger, in clarity. I protected them, she said, from absence, from disappointment, from you. Jessie closed his eyes briefly. There's not a day I wouldn't have shown up if I had known. She didn't challenge it. Instead, she asked, would you have shown up on the hard days? The flu nights? The mornings they cried for no reason? When I couldn't afford their jackets and rent in the same week? He stayed silent. I protected them, she repeated. Not from your name, from your inconsistency. Jessie looked at her again. Fully. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. She'd already survived without his apology. Now, she was protecting their peace without asking for his permission. Jessie didn't storm back into their lives. He didn't call lawyers. He didn't send flowers. He asked for a meeting. Lena agreed, but on her terms. They met at a public park, midday. No drama, no audience. Jesse wore jeans for the first time in months, a button-up shirt that still managed to look pressed. He waited by the shaded benches, checking his phone but not texting, not pushing. When she arrived, she had no makeup on, no heels, just her usual quiet presence, and a bag packed with snacks, wipes, and crayons. The boys trailed behind, running ahead toward the slides. Lena didn't introduce him immediately. She sat down beside him without greeting. Jesse opened with a single line. "I'm not here to fix what I broke. I'm here to learn what I missed." She studied him for a moment. Not soft, not cruel, just honest. "You're not entitled to a role in their life," she said. "You're here on invitation. Nothing more." He nodded. "I'll earn it." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence no longer meant she was waiting on him. It meant the boundaries were set. And for the first time in his life, Jesse accepted that being near his children wasn't a right. It was something he would have to show up for, one day at a time. The visits were structured, predictable, safe. Lena chose neutral ground every time. Parks, libraries, community centers. Places where the boys could play freely and she could observe without worry. She never left them alone with Jesse. Not yet, he understood. At the public garden, he waited while the twins chased butterflies. He brought juice boxes and didn't ask questions. He stayed quiet until spoken to. At the zoo, he walked a step behind, didn't try to hold their hands. Let Kyle ramble about cheetahs, while Zion lingered near the glass tanks staring at turtles. When Lena spoke, he listened. When she gave instructions, he followed. One afternoon, at the city museum, she handed him a wipes packet without explanation. He cleaned Kyle's hands after a snack and threw the wrapper in the trash without flinching. Small things, she noticed, but she didn't say it. He didn't ask when he could take them out alone. He didn't beg for weekends. He didn't call at odd hours or send gifts with strings attached. Instead, he showed up, on time, every time. Lena had seen promises before. Now, she was watching patterns. Jesse never corrected them. From the first day, the boys called him Mr. Jesse, mimicking what Lena said when introducing him at the park. He nodded, smiled, and answered to it every time. Kyle asked if he was one of their mom's friends. Jesse said, "Something like that." Zion asked why he came around so often. Jesse said, "Because I like spending time with you." Neither boy pushed further. Children ask what they feel safe enough to understand. Jesse kept his answers simple, steady. He read stories aloud while they colored. He brought puzzles to the coffee shop near their home and helped them sort pieces by edge. He learned which twin liked grape juice and which one hated anything sticky. He never tried to force closeness. When Kyle slipped once and called him Dad, no one corrected it. But Jesse didn't repeat it either. Lena heard it. She looked at Jesse sharply, but he met her gaze with restraint. He said nothing, didn't smile, didn't freeze. He just let the moment pass without claiming it. Because this wasn't about what he wanted to be called. It was about who he was willing to become. It started with Kyle offering him a piece of his sandwich. Then, Zion asked if Jesse could help fix the wheel on his toy truck. After that, they began looking for him when they arrived at the park, scanning the bench for the man in the navy jacket with the quiet voice. They didn't know why he mattered, but they knew they felt safe when he was near. Jesse noticed the shift. Not overnight, but in small, undeniable ways. Kyle started asking him to watch his flips on the jungle gym. Zion asked him to read the same bedtime book, twice in a row. Once, Lena was 10 minutes late due to traffic. She arrived to find Jesse sitting cross-legged on the grass, surrounded by coloring pages and a pile of goldfish crackers. Kyle rested against his arm. Zion had fallen asleep in his lap. Jesse didn't look up when she approached. He only whispered, "They were tired. We stayed put." She didn't speak. She just watched. It was happening. The boys were opening slowly, not because Jesse asked them to, but because he'd stopped trying to prove anything. He was simply present. And for the first time, Lena didn't feel the urge to end the visit early. She stayed too, not as a test, but as a witness. It happened on a Saturday. Kyle was climbing the low wall outside the Community Arts Center, a place they visited often. Jessie stood nearby, holding a juice pouch and watching both boys from the sidewalk. Zion was tracing shapes into chalk on the pavement. Kyle was trying to balance, arms wide, steps careful but eager. Then it happened. Kyle slipped. His shoe caught the edge of the stone, and his body tumbled sideways. He hit the grass with a sharp thud, followed by a shriek. Before anyone else moved, Jessie was already running. He dropped the juice, covered the distance in seconds, and knelt beside Kyle. Not panicked, focused. Kyle's elbow was scraped, lip trembling, eyes wide and watering. Jessie didn't lecture him. He didn't ask why he'd been climbing. He checked Kyle's arm gently, keeping eye contact the entire time. "You're okay. I'm here." Kyle nodded quickly, though tears had already fallen. Jessie pulled tissues from his coat pocket and dabbed the elbow. "You scared me," he said softly. "But you're still strong." Zion stood nearby, holding his brother's chalk, watching. Kyle leaned into Jessie's chest. That was the first time. He let himself be held. 2 weeks later, Lena invited Jessie to join them at the library's reading hour. Not for public performance, just observation. Zion was quieter than Kyle, more reserved. He often sat with his chin in his hand during reading time, flipping pages slowly. That day, Lena placed a beginner-level book in front of him, one he'd read before but always skipped the middle pages. She nodded to Jessie, signaling him to help. Zion didn't look up. Jessie sat beside him. Not across, beside. "Can I sit here?" he asked. Zion nodded. The book was about animals at the zoo. Zion started. The L.E.fant. Jessie didn't interrupt, didn't correct, didn't sigh. He waited. Zion stumbled over giraffe. He frowned, closed the book halfway. Jessie gently nudged it back open. "Want me to sound it out with you?" Zion nodded, frustrated but still trying. They read the page together, word by word, slowly. Jessie didn't celebrate loudly when they finished. He didn't clap or cheer. He just said, "You did the hard part. That counts." Zion beamed, then whispered, "Read again?" Jessie turned back to page 1 without hesitation. That's when Lena looked up from her seat in the corner and paused. Lena didn't let him stay late the first few times, but eventually she invited him to the apartment around dinner. Not for long, just enough to see the twins' end-of-day rhythm. Jessie didn't overstep. He stood in the doorway as Lena handed out pajamas, watched as she folded the blankets down on the boys' twin beds. Kyle brushed his teeth while humming. Zion moved slower, tugging at his socks. Lena glanced at Jessie. "We start with prayers, then one book, then the light goes out." He nodded, took mental notes like it was a high-stakes briefing. Zion brought his favorite stuffed bear over, held it toward Jessie. "He sits here. Between us." Jessie placed the bear gently between the boys and adjusted the pillow. Kyle giggled. Lena led the short prayer. Jessie didn't speak. He bowed his head and listened. After that, he picked the book, The One and Only Me. He read it softly, even-paced, paused when Kyle yawned, asked Zion to point at his favorite word. When it ended, he tucked the blanket to Kyle's chin. Zion whispered, "You read better than Mom." Lena raised a brow from the doorway. Jessie smiled, but didn't answer. He knew what not to touch. He stood, backed away quietly, and turned off the light. They didn't protest. They slept easy. Lena didn't relax easily. She had seen charm before, had heard promises that vanished faster than flowers wilting. But Jessie wasn't performing. He didn't flinch at hard tasks. He didn't expect praise. He didn't rush the boys through emotions or routines. He simply stayed. She watched from the kitchen the evening Kyle spilled milk across the table. Jessie didn't sigh. He grabbed paper towels, knelt, and handed Kyle one. She watched from the hallway when Zion got frustrated trying to zip his jacket. Jesse crouched down, zipped it halfway, and let Zion do the rest. He didn't post pictures, didn't send updates to anyone. He wasn't collecting moments, he was living them. Lena noticed how the boys looked at him differently now. How Kyle leaned his head on Jesse's shoulder after stories, how Zion saved his tougher questions for him. She also noticed her own instincts, how she no longer stood between Jesse and the boys when they hugged, not because she trusted easily, but because she was starting to believe he'd stopped measuring his worth by how fast he could earn forgiveness. He was proving something else. That showing up quietly held more weight than arriving loudly. The sky cracked open around 6:40 p.m. It wasn't a light drizzle. It came fast, thick sheets of rain pounding against the apartment windows like a warning. Jesse had come by earlier with takeout. Nothing fancy, just Lena's favorite rice and roasted vegetables from the spot near the twins' school. He hadn't planned to stay long, but the storm made the choice for him. Lena checked the weather alert twice. Flash flooding in parts of the city, roads blocked. Uber prices spiked. "You're not driving in that," she said flatly. Jesse nodded. "I'll stay out of the way." The twins didn't seem bothered. Kyle was curled up on the couch with a blanket, Zion dozing off halfway through a movie they'd already seen 3 times. Lena moved around the kitchen, loading dishes. Jesse offered to help. She didn't stop him. By 9:15, the boys were asleep in their beds. The rain hadn't slowed. The air in the apartment had. Jesse stood near the window, watching cars crawl through puddles below. Lena handed him a towel for his shoes. He dried them, then sat. So did she, not close, but not far. Across the couch, feet tucked under her, arms folded lightly. The storm outside wasn't the loudest thing in the room anymore. Neither of them reached for the remote. The television stayed off. The living room glowed soft under the lamp in the corner. The walls carried years of stillness, none of it angry, but all of it full. Jesse sat with his elbows on his knees. Lena leaned back, eyes fixed on the coffee table like it had answers. She broke the silence first. "They sleep better these days." He nodded. "They trust the routine." Another pause. "You helped build it," she said quietly, "even if you weren't here for the beginning." Jesse looked at her, not quickly but fully. "I've learned to value showing up late, over not at all." Her face didn't change, but something in her jaw relaxed. He didn't move closer, didn't reach across the cushions. They stayed where they were, close enough to speak, far enough not to misread the moment. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "The deal you chose over dinner that night?" Jesse let out a breath. "Only every time I see their eyes and think, I could have known them sooner." She nodded once. No anger, just agreement. The space between them felt like a room built on memory, carefully preserved, never reopened. Until now. Minutes passed. Lena stretched her legs slightly, still on her side of the couch. Jesse leaned back, hands clasped in front of him. The storm tapped against the windows. "People think I'm composed," Jesse said suddenly. "In meetings, on camera. Even when everything's going wrong, they think I've got it handled." Lena waited. "But I don't feel that with you," he said. "I feel—" He trailed off, then started again. "I look at you like I'm afraid to break something." Her eyes lifted to his. "I used to think I needed to prove I was unshakable. But you, being near you, makes me aware of every step I take, every word I choose. Not because you're fragile, but because I was careless." The tension in her shoulders softened, but she didn't speak. "I don't want to fix what we had," he added. "I want to protect what's still left of it, even if that's only quiet moments like this." He didn't lean in, didn't ask for anything. He simply let the moment sit. And for once, silence didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like trust. Lena shifted, not toward him, just enough to rest her head against the armrest. She drew in a slow breath. "You know," she said, "when you left, I didn't cry the way I thought I would." Jesse turned slightly, not interrupting. "I expected pain," she continued, "but what I felt was clarity. I finally saw that I had been waiting for you to choose me, and I was tired." He nodded once. "Not defensive. You chose something else, she said. So I chose me. I chose them. The rain slowed outside. The ticking clock on the shelf filled the space between their words. Jesse leaned back into the couch. I don't want your forgiveness tonight, he said. Just this peace, this being near you, without hurting anything. Lena looked at him carefully. She didn't speak. She didn't move toward him, not at first, but a few minutes later, her fingers brushed the cushion between them. He didn't reach for her. He waited. Then she leaned slightly, enough that their shoulders touched, enough to be intentional. He turned. Their eyes met. No rush, no pressure. Then, softly, she kissed him. It wasn't long. It wasn't heated. It was earned. She pulled back first, eyes clear. We move slowly, she said. I know, he replied. And he meant it. The morning after the storm, Jesse left early. He didn't linger, didn't try to recap the kiss, didn't make a speech. Lena handed him a coffee in a travel cup, nodded once, and walked back inside without looking back. Later that week, she sent a message. We don't rush. We move slowly. That still stands. Jesse read the text twice before replying. Understood. She didn't owe him intimacy because he finally showed up. One kiss didn't rewrite the past. Presence was not a shortcut to trust. She made it clear in small ways. No overnight visits unless necessary. No assumptions. No calling it us until she said so. At a weekend farmer's market, Jesse walked beside her carrying groceries. Their fingers brushed once. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lace her hand in his either. At school pickup, he stood by her side while Kyle ran out first. A teacher said, Dad? Assuming. Lena corrected gently. Family friend. Jesse didn't flinch. He nodded. He knew what they were building wasn't performance, it was structure, and she was still making sure it could carry weight before calling it home. Time didn't stretch. It shaped. Jesse didn't chase Lena for answers. He gave space. He stayed consistent. He called only when expected. He never showed up unannounced. Every visit had purpose. Soccer game, reading hour, dental checkup. He learned to pack the boys' lunches on weekends when they stayed late with him. He knew Kyle liked carrot sticks cut straight, while Zion preferred his with peanut butter. When Lena had to travel for a work training 2 hours away, she asked him to help cover one afternoon. He didn't act triumphant. He packed a bag, showed up 10 minutes early, and followed her notes exactly. The boys came home to clean rooms, dinner made, homework checked. Lena said, thank you. Jesse said nothing more than of course. There were moments between them now, quiet ones. Nights where they sat close and talked, but nothing more. Mornings when they texted photos of the boys' art projects or new sneakers. One evening, Lena stood in the kitchen, sipping tea, while Jesse helped the twins with a science project. She listened to him explain magnets without overcomplicating. She smiled, then looked away before he noticed. Trust wasn't loud, but it was building. It started with the small things. Jesse was the one who remembered the dentist appointment when Lena nearly forgot. He texted reminders, printed forms, paid for Kyle's new prescription glasses without announcing it. He joined the morning routine on Fridays, showed up with bagels, zipped jackets and tied shoes before walking the twins to school beside Lena. At Zion's parent-to-teacher conference, he asked the right questions, quietly, respectfully. The teacher assumed they were married. Neither corrected her. He read bedtime stories 3 nights a week, showed up to field day, sat through a rainy soccer match just to see Kyle stand in goal. Zion started texting him drawings from a school tablet. Kyle asked for help with a paper on animals, because Mr. Jesse knows about lions. Even the neighbors adjusted. They waved when he parked in front. The security guard at the apartment complex let him in without questions. One day, Lena called him, not for the boys, but for herself. She was sick. Light fever, headache. He brought soup, checked her forehead, took the boys outside so she could sleep. When she woke, the apartment was quiet, and she wasn't alone. Not in the way that mattered anymore. It happened during dinner. Jessie had made spaghetti. Kyle sat at the table twirling noodles around his fork, while Zion poked at a broccoli stem suspiciously. Lena was finishing paperwork at the dining counter, watching quietly. "Dad," Kyle said casually, "can I get more juice?" Jessie froze. So did Lena. Zion didn't blink. "He's not Dad," he said. Then looked at Jessie. "Are you?" Jessie set the pitcher down. He didn't look at Lena. He looked at them. "I want to be," he said. "If that's okay with both of you." Zion shrugged. "You already act like one." Kyle smiled. "Yeah, you make our lunch better than Mom." "Excuse me?" Lena said, mock offended. The boys laughed. She didn't correct them. Jessie looked at her then, not with expectation, with hope. She didn't nod, didn't speak, but she didn't stop them either. From that day, the name stuck. No grand announcement, no big explanation, just a quiet shift. They started calling him Dad in public, in private, in small moments. He answered every time, not because it proved anything, but because, for once, he'd earned the name the right way. It was a Thursday. No holiday, no celebration, no special dinner waiting in the kitchen. The twins were upstairs, already drifting to sleep. Lena was wiping the counters, barefoot, hair tied back. Jessie stood by the dining table with a quiet urgency. He didn't clear his throat, didn't wait for a better moment. He simply reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a ring. No box, no speech, just a man holding something small, in the only room where he ever felt truly grounded. Lena glanced up, her hands stilled. Jessie lowered himself to one knee. Not with fanfare, not with nerves, but with presence. He didn't rush. He didn't smile wide or deliver a script. He looked at her the same way he had looked at the twins the first time they called him Dad, with steadiness. No pressure, no demand, just choice. She didn't gasp, didn't cover her mouth. She simply looked down at him like she was seeing something honest, something she didn't need to run from, and maybe, finally, something she could walk toward. Jessie took a breath. No cameras, no witnesses, just the quiet thrum of the dishwasher and the faint hum of a lullaby playing upstairs. "I don't have the right words," he began. "And maybe that's a good thing, because what we have now isn't about saying the perfect line." He looked at her, his voice steady. "It's about showing up." He held the ring with both hands, not reaching forward, not asking yet. "I choose you, every day, without conditions, without performance, without expectation of a reward." Lena didn't blink. She stood still, arms resting loosely at her sides. "I will love our sons with more than responsibility. I'll love them with consistency." He swallowed, not from nerves, but from everything he wanted to say without flooding the moment. "I know you've lived through my absence, and I know you're not waiting for me to fill something. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here because I'm better with you, because this time I see clearly, and I'm not going anywhere." He stopped, then waited, still kneeling, still quiet. No grand setting, just the truth. Lena didn't move at first. She looked at the man kneeling on her floor, not the CEO, not the man who once missed every sign, but the one who stood beside her through scraped knees and late-night school projects. The one who helped without asking for thanks. She didn't dream about weddings anymore. She had grown past fairy tales. What she wanted now was reliability, peace, steady breath at her side on hard days. A home where her children never wondered who would stay. Jessie had already proven more with actions than 1,000 apologies could say. He had waited when she said slow. He had sat through the tension. He had shown up every time, quietly, without ceremony. Now, he was kneeling, not to impress, not to win, but to commit. She stepped closer. "You're not asking me to forget," she said. "No," he replied. "I'm asking you to remember where we are now." She reached out. Her fingers brushed the side of his face. Then she nodded. "Yes, simple, clear, complete." He stood, slipped the ring onto her finger like it belonged there, not as decoration, but as a mark of presence. They didn't kiss right away. They just stood still, together. The ceremony was small. No guest list beyond what mattered. Lena, Jesse, Kyle, Zion, and a city clerk with a soft voice and an open morning slot. They wore no tuxedo, no long dress. Jesse had on a dark shirt with sleeves rolled. Lena wore a wrap dress. The twins helped her pick. Kyle brought the ring in a Ziploc bag. Zion insisted on carrying a flower. The courthouse room was plain, no music. Just chairs and sunlight through dusty windows. When asked to speak, Jesse didn't repeat anything rehearsed. He only said, "I already belong here." Lena replied, "So do I." They signed their names side by side on a line that marked new beginnings, not as a reset, but as a continuation. Afterward, they bought ice cream from a truck outside. Zion spilled his cone. Jesse caught the second scoop with a napkin. Kyle got sprinkles stuck in his hair. Lena laughed, the kind of laugh that didn't hold back. They took no staged photos, but Jesse snapped one candid shot, Lena laughing with the boys under a tree. That was enough. They went home that evening. No fireworks. Just dinner, bedtime, and two boys who whispered, "Night, Dad." And Lena who whispered back, "Home." The boardroom hadn't disappeared. Jesse still led Vaney Global, still signed contracts, still made billion-dollar decisions before most people finished breakfast. But the difference now was what he protected after the closing bell. He no longer stayed late by default. He no longer accepted every dinner invitation masked as a meeting. If a deal needed more hours, it waited until after bedtime stories were read. His calendar was color-coded: blue for meetings, red for legal, green for home. Every night, between 7:45 and 8:30, the green block was untouchable. At home, Kyle liked space-themed books. Zion preferred the ones with hidden pictures. Jesse read both, one on each side of the couch, the boys pressed against him, heads nodding. Sometimes he dozed off before they did. He didn't mind. One night, a client called during story time. His assistant texted, "They say it's urgent." Jesse replied, "So is this." He didn't answer the call. He was learning how to measure success, not by market reach or press coverage, but by the way two boys looked up at him mid-sentence and whispered, "Keep reading." Routine became rhythm. Jesse now walked the boys to school 3 mornings a week. He wore hoodies instead of blazers, sneakers instead of Oxfords. He carried backpacks filled with library books and snack pouches. The neighbors had gotten used to it. Jesse Vaney, former media recluse, now tying shoelaces on the curb and reminding Zion not to forget his lunchbox. At home, he learned the art of pancakes, not the boxed kind. He asked Lena for her mix ratio, measured flour carefully, burned the first 3 batches. The boys laughed. He didn't get defensive. He adjusted the heat. By week 3, his pancakes had character, slightly crisp edges, soft centers. He added banana slices when Kyle lost a tooth and couldn't chew well. Zion once asked for smiley faces drawn in syrup, and Jesse obliged, lopsided but sincere. One morning, Lena came down to find the table set, the boys already halfway through breakfast. Jesse was in the kitchen flipping another round, apron dusted in flour. "You're early," she said. He looked back, smiling faintly. "I like this part of the day," and he meant it. The kids were asleep. The apartment was still. Lena sat on the balcony with a throw blanket around her shoulders. Jesse joined her with 2 mugs of tea, hers peppermint. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't press or demand, just being. She looked at him, the man beside her. There was no tension now, no edge. He wasn't waiting to prove something. She wasn't bracing for disappointment. He'd become dependable, quietly, steadily. She took a sip, then set the mug down. "You know," she began, "there was a time I had to teach myself not to flinch when I heard your name." Jesse didn't respond. He listened. Lena turned slightly toward him. "You were something I survived, and I don't say that with resentment anymore. I say that because I see the change." Her voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. "You are no longer a man I need to recover from." Jessie stared at her, the words sinking deep. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't ask for more. But his eyes said everything. That sentence had done more than all their history combined. It had closed the chapter on hurt, and quietly opened the one called peace. Jessie sat with her words heavy in his chest, not as a wound, but as a weight that belonged. He leaned forward, arms resting on his knees, and stared at the quiet night beyond the railing. Then he spoke, voice low. "You're no longer a woman I have to chase to understand." Lena looked at him. "I used to think love was something you win, something you convince someone to keep giving. I saw you as a mystery I couldn't solve fast enough." He turned toward her. "But now I know, understanding you wasn't about studying you. It was about respecting what you already knew about yourself." She held his gaze, said nothing. "I'm not chasing now," he added. "I'm walking beside you, and I'll keep doing that, even if some days you walk faster than me." Lena leaned into her seat, exhaling slowly. Then, without ceremony, she reached for his hand. Their fingers met, no tension, just warmth. Jessie closed his eyes for a brief moment, because in that single gesture he felt something no contract or conquest had ever given him: belonging. Not forced, not fought for, freely given. The garden had changed, but the address hadn't. Same Hampton's estate, same winding stone paths, same trickle of music dancing between lanterns and hedges. But this time, Jessie didn't arrive alone. He stood near the back terrace, a linen shirt unbuttoned at the top, drink in one hand, his other resting on Lena's waist. Her laughter came easily now. She wasn't scanning the crowd. She wasn't guarded. She wasn't surviving. She was at peace. Their invitation list was different, smaller, warmer. Not just industry names, but friends, neighbors, teachers from the boys' school. People who knew their story not from headlines, but from quiet mornings and weekend bake sales. Lena had insisted on no caterers for the kids' section. Jesse grilled hot dogs himself. Got mustard on his shirt, didn't care. They shared small smiles that needed no translation. When someone asked how long they'd been married, Lena replied, "Long enough to know we're doing it right this time." Jesse looked out across the yard. Guests mingled. Laughter carried over music. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of two familiar voices came barreling through the hedges. "Dad!" Kyle rounded the corner first, one sneaker untied, his shirt half tucked in. Zion was seconds behind, face red from running, cheeks smeared with frosting. Jesse set his glass down without hesitation. The boys tore through a maze of garden lights and chairs, weaving past guests with the kind of joyful disregard only children could get away with. Kyle jumped onto the low step where Jesse stood. "Uncle Theo said he could beat you in a race. We told him no chance." Zion tugged on Jesse's wrist. "Come prove it. Right now." Jesse looked at Lena. She raised an eyebrow. "You going to let them talk like that without backing it up?" Jesse laughed, shaking his head. "Legacy is on the line, huh?" He followed the boys to the grass, rolled up his sleeves and crouched into a makeshift sprinting stance. Someone snapped a picture from the porch, Jesse mid-laugh, surrounded by joy, not armor. They ran the short stretch of yard twice. Kyle won the first. Zion collapsed laughing on the second. Jesse didn't care who crossed first. He looked at them, his sons, tangled in grass and sunlight, and nothing about the moment felt borrowed. From the corner near the garden's edge, a cluster of Jesse's former colleagues watched. One of them sipped from a crystal glass, shaking his head. I barely recognized him. He used to leave events like this in the middle of dessert. Another chuckled. He used to leave before dessert even showed up. Theo, an older partner who once shared a boardroom with Jesse, watched with a half smile. "He's changed," one of them said, quieter this time. Theo nodded. "Yeah, but not just mellowed. He's grounded. It's like the storm passed and something solid stayed behind." The others exchanged glances. No snark, no cynicism. In a world where reinvention often meant rebranding, Jesse had done something rarer. He'd returned to himself, not as a power move, as a person. Across the lawn, Jesse helped Zion untangle a kite string while Kyle climbed into Lena's lap. No suits, no tension, just a man who finally understood what his legacy should feel like and who it should belong to. As twilight softened the sky, Jesse wandered back toward the house alone. For a moment, he paused by the same marble fountain where years ago he had once stood frozen, champagne in hand, facing a truth he hadn't been ready for. He looked at the reflection in the water, same face. But the eyes staring back didn't carry the weight of regret. Kyle's voice called out from the swing set, "Dad, watch me." Jesse turned, smiled, and raised a hand in reply. This time, he didn't feel like he was chasing life from the sidelines. He was inside it, present, whole, and the eyes staring back at him weren't haunting. They were home.